Welcome to Right on Track, brought to you by the Publishing Club of Laguna Woods. I am your host, Dianna Bolen. Today's guest is Barbara Pronin, a former television actor, a band singer, a probation officer, journalist, a news editor, and substitute teacher. The last job as a substitute teacher inspired Barbara's first book. It was titled Substitute Teaching, a Handbook for Hassle-Free Subbing. It was published by St. Martin's Press in 1983, and this book is still paying royalties. She has also written 6 other books, most of them mysteries. The book we are most proud of today is her book, Winter's End. Welcome, Barbara, to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, well, let's say some more about this book. That book, just recently in May, if I understand, won the gold medal for Best Adult Novel from the Independent Book Publishers. This book, Winter's End, is a historical novel.
Right. It's
Yes.
a real departure from my previous books. I loved writing mysteries, but somehow once this book took over my heart and my head, it was probably the most fun I've ever had writing a book, and I'm really gratified that the reviews have been so wonderful and to win this prize.
Yes, yes. In fact, I mean, it is really amazing. When we were talking earlier, I saw you go, oh, the reviews are wonderful.
They are, yeah.
And that is such a great thing because a writer doesn't really ever know how good their writing is until things like this start to happen.
Begin happening.
Yes.
Right, correct.
Awards and accolades.
It's really thrilling, and
Yes.
I'm very gratified, and I feel very humble.
Yeah, it's you, but
It is humbling.
Well, let's start with Winter's End. So it's a historical novel, and so how did the novel come to be?
Well, it began, I guess, during the pandemic when I was, locked in, like we all were, and I was doing a lot of reading. I was reading everything from, novels to cereal boxes, and one day I happened to read a story about, a true story about 2 Dutch sisters in Haarlem in the Netherlands, Truus and Freddie Oberstegen. They were 15 and 16 years old, and they were recruited by the resistance essentially to flirt with German officers in the local taverns and lure them to their deaths, and the resistance would use their IDs and their uniforms to help people who were escaping from Hitler's Reich, from the Nazis. So I read about these girls, and somehow one night I was in bed. I'm not sure if I was asleep or in that little wakeful space between the time you're awake and you fall asleep. But all of a sudden, somehow those 2 sisters morphed into one, and her name was Evie. She came to me as Evie, and she moved into my head, and she literally refused to leave until I told her story. And so I sat down one day and I started writing about Evie, who then introduced me to the other characters one by one. And there are no chapters in the book. The book is narrated in turn by these 3 women. The book just flowed. Honestly, I wrote it, I think, in less than 7 months, which is something of a record.
Yes.
And in fact, I wrote the last scene in my head, in bed, in the middle of the night, so many times that by the time I finally got to write it, I could hardly type fast enough.
Yeah, isn't it wonderful when that happens?
Fun book to write.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And the stories of the 3 women just kind of wove in and out throughout the book.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. It was really fun to write, and I think it's fun to read.
Yes, it was fun to read. I enjoyed it immensely.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
thank you.
yes.
Thank you.
And so, historical novel, that means that you, well, in this case particularly, what time in the war was this?
It's in the last few months. It takes place after the landing at Normandy, when everyone in Europe was really hoping that the Allies would make a final fast push and liberate Belgium and the Netherlands and so forth. But in fact, the Allied forces were not able to do that. They were stopped at several points, and so I had to be really, really careful that I got the timeline right in terms of where they were at what moment and when. The book ends actually 3 months before the liberation. So yeah, but it has its own little ending, which I will not
Don't
give
share,
away.
yes.
No, I won't. I won't.
It's too good. So how did you keep track of your storyline and the historical timeline?
Well, I always keep good notes as I write. I don't plot my work beforehand. I just, for me, writing, the best part of writing is finding out what's going to happen. And I've learned to trust myself. I've learned to realize that the back of my brain knows a lot more than the front of my brain does. And so when Zoe, the second woman in this novel, came into my head, she came to me as a veterinarian. And I could not have told you why in heaven's name she was a veterinarian, but 150 pages later, she needed to have some medical knowledge. And so there she was. So, you know, again, the back of your brain, at least for me, knows a lot more than what's going on in the front of the brain.
Yes,
So,
well, I firmly believe in that myself. And many writers have said that. Creative people have said that kind of that process that goes on, might say unconsciously.
Right.
And then it comes forward, sometimes in a rush.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's a great feeling because it's almost like well, I don't want to get too woo-woo, but some people would say like you're channeling
I know,
the
though,
information.
I hesitate to say it. He moved into my head and wouldn't leave until I told a story, but honestly, it's true. I mean, she just forced me to sit down and start writing.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, that's great.
yeah.
So your books are character-driven. Have all of your books, all of your characters kind of lived in your head first?
Absolutely, they all have. My books are very much character-driven. I think that the reader has to care about your character. If they don't care about your characters, they're not going to read the book. So from the very beginning, you have to engage them in what the character wants and is trying to accomplish. And if you can do that, it's smooth sailing. So that's kind of the way I tend to work. Yeah.
Well, you're a little too humble because I know so much more goes into writing a book. In fact, I just looked up for preparation for this story or the show, this kind of idea of the arc, of the story arc, and I mean it's very important to like really develop the world of your character, and then have some kind of disruptive event that wakes them up or prevents them
achieving their goal. Right?
Yes, and the stakes growing over time, and then some kind of turning point or action, and then the kind of the settling down after the climax, and finally a conclusion.
Right.
And so, are you saying that when you write, you're kind of instinctually doing that?
I think so. You know, I think, especially at this point in my life, everything I've ever done has prepared me for what I'm doing now. For example, when I was a drama major in college and I did support myself for a while as an actor, and I read so many plays that I got the feel of dialogue, and that has helped me. And many of my reviews, especially the early reviews, always talked about, you know, crisp dialogue, and I think that's where it came from. And of course, being a newspaper writer, you learn to write really tight. And in fact, sometimes I have to go back and put in some color, you know, what were they eating, what were they wearing, because readers care about those kinds of things.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, so I write tight, but I am very careful to put them in a whole environment that At least I hope so, that you can get involved in too.
Yes, yes, very much, sir. So, very much so. I really, really enjoyed this book. And
Thank you.
Yeah, and these other ones too. I mean, just to mention, The Miner's Canary.
That was the last mystery that I wrote.
And this is a mystery
Takes place in the town of Deadwood, where there was a gold mine, one of the most highly producing gold mines in the country. And my husband and I happened to take a trip to Mount Rushmore, and we stayed a couple days in Deadwood, and the mine is still there. Of course, it's not operating anymore, but it's open for tours. So we took the tour, and there I am rambling around this old musty, dusty mine, and I looked down toward the bottom, and in my writer's head I saw a dead body. So, you know, the question was, who is he? How did he get down there? Who shoved him down there?
Yeah.
And, you know, by the time I came home, I was ready to write the story.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about these two as well?
Yeah, these are older. Syndrome is actually my the first book I wrote after substitute teaching, because once I did that book, I had a little credibility in the publishing world, and so I was able to write and have published my first novel, and that was Syndrome, and it's a medical mystery. It's all about some woo-hoo things happening in a hospital where people who are dying are suddenly getting up out of their hospital beds and going home.
And somebody's trying to make money on that.
Yeah, that's right. So who done it? You
Yes.
know, that was.
And then Thicker Than Water.
Thicker Than Water. Thicker Than Water is about a young photographer who's looking for family. She's been lonely all of her life, and she's making a great effort to see family. And here too, this one takes place around Santa Barbara in one of the missions, and same kind of thing. I looked at this big old chest in the mission, and I lifted this really heavy lid, and of course there was a lady lying in the bottom of it, and she was wearing a suit not very different from this color, and that was the beginning of Thicker Than Water. Again, you ask the questions: who done it, why, right?
Yes,
So,
yes.
yeah.
So these books are all published with an independent book publisher.
No.
Oh.
Winter's End is published with an independent publisher. All the rest were by major publishers.
Oh.
Yeah. What happened was there was a time gap. At one point I had a job offer to write some executive speeches and kind of high-level public relations, and I did that, and it was kind of fun for a while, but I got away from writing, and by the time I came back, my agent was gone, and that was actually with the Miner's Canary. And the world of publishing has changed so much since I first began.
I was going to ask you.
Yeah, when I wrote, I don't have it here, a book called Finders Keepers, it was also very well received, and my editor at Berkeley Books actually told me I had to come to New York and interview agents.
Wow, times have changed.
Times have changed mightily. Today there are so many more people writing, there's so much more competition, and also many of the big publishers, there were 30 publishers, major publishers, the Simon & Schusters and the St. Martin's and all of those, but many of them are gone. Now there are 5 major publishers, and it isn't nearly as easy to get published as it once was. So I took a chance on an independent publisher, and so far it's worked out really well. It's Black Rose Writing is the name of it, and they're doing a good job for me. So
yeah, it sounds like
and
it.
They're just as pleased as I am that it's starting to get all these good reviews and awards and so forth.
So what's different about working with an independent publisher as opposed to a publishing house?
Well, a little more work on my part. Traditional publishers probably do a deeper job of editing, but basically the difference is with a major publisher, you get an advance, but it's an advance against royalties, so you have to earn that back. But you do get an advance, as opposed to many independent publishers won't give you an advance, but they give you more money on the backside, you know, a higher percentage of royalties.
Yes.
And it's a far cry from self-publishing. There's a lot of self-publishing going on today. But with self-publishing, you know, you have to find your own cover artist and get your own layout person, and I just don't have the time. I want to write. I don't want to get caught up in all the, you know, the technical stuff. So
yes.
and
I
that's
think
basically the difference.
I think that's smart. I mean, because if you're good at writing, why try to become a cover designer?
Yeah,
Makes no
right.
sense.
Well, because some people, you know, some people are dying to be published.
Yes.
I mean, they really are,
Yes,
and
yes.
some of them, you know, they learn how to do it. Some of them learn how to do the layout. I don't have the time or the interest in doing
Yes.
that. So.
Yeah, I join you on that. So now, in terms of financial success, I believe that your substitute teaching book is still the top one.
Yeah, well, yeah, nonfiction typically has a much longer shelf life than any kind of fiction. You know, you take a book by a major, you know, by Kristen Hanna or, you know, John Grisham, they're going to have a little longer shelf life with their books than I do, mainly because they get some more advertising out of it. And that's another difference. Your traditional publisher is going to put a lot more money behind advertising and marketing. With an independent publisher, you need to do a lot more marketing on your own.
Yes.
So I'm doing a lot of local bookshop book signings, and I'm speaking to clubs and organizations. And now, of course, people have heard me speak, and so people are calling me, "Will you come speak to my group?" Yeah, of course I will. Of course I absolutely will. So I'm here at your beck and call.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
So let's see here. We've got so many things. Okay, what about having some of your books optioned? What does that mean, and what
you
does
mean
it
option
involve?
for film?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So 2 of my books, Finders Keepers, and I did forget which one, have been optioned for film. Finders Keepers, for example, was optioned by a man at Lorimar called Thomas White. He was the producer and director of a show you might remember called White Shadow. And so he took a year's option on it. Options don't pay a lot of money, a few $1,000s, and they're typically for a year. Well, he took the option out, and then he went to Europe to produce and direct a movie I think was called Jitterbug. It had to do with German kids who were getting through the World War II by doing American jitterbugging. And it turned out that the book was a bit of a flop, and he was very discouraged and tired as well, and so he did not renew the option, and that was the end of that. But I'm hoping, anybody listening out there, I'd love to have Winter's On option made into a TV movie even.
Yes, and there are more opportunities out there now.
Many, many more.
Yes,
Sure.
for your book to go to film.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, you met Ray Bradbury.
I did. I was still in my late 20s or early 30s, and I went to a writers' conference in Walnut at Mount San Antonio College. And I'm a big believer, I have been all my life, in writers' conferences. It's a great place to connect with people and, you know, learn a lot. Anyway, Ray Bradbury was one of the keynote speakers that day, and by the luck of the draw, when it came lunchtime, I happened to be seated at his table. And we talked, you know, all of us at the table, and at one point he asked me what I was writing, and I at that point I was writing short stories, which were difficult to sell then and even more difficult to sell now because there aren't as many outlets for them. Anyway, Ray Bradbury said, "You know what, Barbara?" He said, "Just add in a couple more subplots and a few interesting characters, and write a novel. Don't waste your time with short stories. And as it turns out, that was probably the best advice I ever got.
It is something, yes. I mean, going to conferences, you think you're going to learn something by going to a class or a speech by somebody, and you may.
And you do, yes, of course.
But also, it's those little interactions that you have with people.
With other writers,
yes.
and publishers, editors. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Best advice I can give you if you're starting out as a writer, go to writers' conferences.
Yes,
yeah.
yes. And in fact, I ran across a reading list by him. And I can't tell you where to find it, but I think if you Google it, you can. And I was amazed at the number of books on there that I have not read yet.
Right. I know.
And some of them are quite old, but
I know. Even among the bestsellers today, I try to keep up with them, but I'm so busy writing. And by the way, I also have a day job still. Yes, I write for a national real estate magazine. And so I have deadlines and interviews and things to do for them as well. So my time is really limited. I wish I had more time for reading,
yes.
but it's hard.
Yes, yes. I was joking that I needed to take a vacation so I could read all the books that I was accumulating.
Right. I get that.
And you tinker on the piano.
Well, yes, but only for my own enjoyment. I love piano music. I love... I really do. I love to listen to it. And I bought my first piano with the first check that I ever got for professional writing. And it's a little spinet, and I love it to pieces. But nobody's ever heard me play but me. I did have a teacher. I had a wonderful teacher. And now I just kind of piddle around on my own. And but it's a wonderful outlet for me. I find it very relaxing, and that's what I need at the end of a long day.
Yes, and I mean, what I know psychologically, you're using a different part of your brain when you're on the keyboard.
Yeah, but I often say I'm going from keyboard to keyboard.
No, that's true. The finger action is kind of similar.
Exactly.
But thinking musically. Yeah, so I have something I was looking at. Your first 3 books were published under a pseudonym, correct?
Not the first 3. Finders Keepers, and 2 more. Actually, yes, because after I had published Syndrome, I was part of a writers' club where we read chapters and critiqued each other's work. And I met a woman by the name of Nikolai Gerstner, and she lived in my neighborhood. And she said to me one day, Mary Higgins Clark, who was then the queen of suspense, is going to be headlining a writers' conference. Up at Sillamar in Northern California. Would you like to go? And I said, sure. So off we went, and Mary was an extremely gracious person. She's gone now, but she was very inspiring and very encouraging to newer writers. And so we had a really good time. It was a rather small personal conference. We got in the car, and as we were driving home, we got this idea. We tossed back and forth for a book, and by the time we got home, we knew we had a story. The only question was who was going to write it, and the answer was over my dead body. So we actually wrote that book together, one of us typing, one of us talking, and somehow the best words came out on paper.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And ultimately, Mary Higgins Clark wrote the book jacket blurb for that one because she read it and at another writers' conference.
Yes. And that's really fortunate when you get a known author.
Yeah, you know what? Writers are really good to each other. For Winter's End, Faye Kellerman, who I'm sure her name will be familiar to many of your readers, she loved Winter's End. She said she calls it a page turner with honest characters who capture your heart and soul.
I thought that was
on
great.
This book. And again, for me, it comes down to characters.
Yeah, what an unexpected event.
Yes, really.
Yes. So going way back, What got you started with writing?
Oh, my goodness. My mother would have told you I was born with a pencil in my mouth. Really, I think by the time I was 6 or 7, as soon as I got my letters and numbers and could hold a pencil, I think I was writing little poems and stories long before I was 8 or 9. And I just went on from there. I guess I never stopped. Except that I did take a detour. You know, I went to college as a drama major. I did go into acting. I did a little band singing. Then I got married and I needed a real job. And so I became a probation officer, as you reeled off. And one thing led to another. But again, one thing led to another exactly. When my kids were in school, I wanted to be home when they were, which is why I became a substitute teacher, which is why I ended up writing the book on substitute teaching.
Yes.
That's still the only one available in the field. And had I not done that, I might never have had the courage to actually start on my first novel.
Yes.
So I've been very fortunate, really, very blessed.
Yes. Yes, and I that's part of that blessing, I think, is being open to kind of influences. You know, not having a rigid idea of where your life is supposed to go.
Right. I think you're right. You need to be open and receive what comes to you.
Yes, receive what comes to you, no matter how it comes there. But
Exactly.
yeah, receive what comes to you.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you know what?
We've come to the end of our time.
Almost, yeah. I'm trying to think of a quick question to ask you. I don't know.
Well, I see you've got Scott Odell there on your notes.
Oh,
and
yes.
Yeah, you know what? When I was 12, I think I was in the 5th or 6th grade, maybe 11, 12. Scott Odell, the author of The Blue Dolphin, which was one of my favorite books, actually came to our school to talk. And I think, looking at the man and the book and realizing that, this came from him was another reason that I was convinced that, one day I was going to do that. And one day I did.
Remarkable.
Yeah.
So what do you plan to do next?
Well, I love the experience of writing historical fiction, so I think I'm going to stay in that genre. And I'm toying with a character who joins the Women's Army when it was first possible to join the Women's Army. And it will include people like Eleanor Roosevelt and Ovida Gulp Hobby. So this time I'll actually be putting words in the mouths of historical figures. So
Very
I'm looking
cool.
forward. That will be another new experience.
Sounds wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. Go ahead.
Thank you for having me. I'm just delighted. Thank you so much.
I'm so impressed, and I'm so happy for you with your recent success.
Thank you.
It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Yes. So this concludes another episode of Right on Track, brought to you by the Publishing Club of Laguna Woods. You can see this show right here on TV6, Mondays at 10:30 a.m. and Thursdays at 4:30 p.m. Thanks to our guest, Barbara Pronin, and to the staff here at TV6. May you follow your dreams with passion, persistence, and faith.
Hooray.
See you again soon. Thank you.